Hey guys, today I've got Tim McDonald on the podcast. This was a fun conversation. Just here a week and a half ago, I guided Tim in the Selway wilderness out there in Idaho on a spring bear hunt. He was successful, but that's really not the interesting part. The interesting part is that Tim started hunting at the age of 64, went on his first hunt at the age of 65, and it was a backpack hunt in some pretty rough country. The guy did a great job, harvested the animal cleanly, humanely, just a really accomplished dude in a very small frame of time, right? We're talking about getting into hunting and then a year later being able to accomplish the goal on this type of hunt. He has a very open mindset in terms of learning about hunting. He talks about how this whole experience has changed his life, but he also gives some advice that I think can be applicable to a lot of you guys out there. Not necessarily just if you're older, if you're starting to hunt and you're 40, 50, 60. A lot of what he talks about is going to get you in the mode and it's going to get you prepared and you'll be ready for your hunt. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Hopefully I've cleaned up a little bit since last time I saw you. I know you have.
Yeah,
You look like a new man over there, dude.
I tell you
So
what, yeah,
yeah, but we had
amazing what his
a
power does.
yeah, no, for sure. We had an awesome hunt, and it's kind of wild to now reflect on it. And you've had a little more time than me. I just got out of the mountains, but what's your takeaway now, man? Have you thought about it at all now that it's been a few days and you're back to civilization?
Yeah, it's still impregnated in my mind. It is was such an amazing experience. The bad thing about memories is they tend to fade over time, and you hate that because this is one
Sure.
of those memories you want it to be imprinted upon your head, and you want it to be fresh all the time because it was really special. It really was. I mean, if I had to count all the experiences I've had in my life, I'd have to say that by far this would be in the top. If I took away the family experiences, and there's food
Sure.
trips and stuff that I did with the kids, this would be the top one of the top three things I've ever done. Family obviously is always special, but even with the family in there, it's definitely in the top 5 or 10 for sure.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool to hear. So just so the viewers know, we were bear hunting. We were in the Selway. We did a wilderness hunt. You killed a bear, but we had to work. We had to work for it. It's not an easy hunt by any means. But the bigger thing, man, is I know that we had gone back and forth a fair amount, and then talking to you during the hunt. You've kind of made a long-term mission out of this to some extent. Like when did you start thinking about it, Tim, and start to prepare,
Hunting in general or the bear hunt?
but really both.
Yeah. So, I grew up in Michigan and moved to California in '97. I should, by definition of being a Michigander, should have been a hunter, but really just never knew anybody that was in that space. And I think hunting is one of those things that you need a mentor to do, to have, or your dad teach you, or a buddy to do it. But yeah, so it's been a wild journey, and I just got really excited about the last year. It's just really taken off.
Yeah, was there something was there like and we didn't really talk about this. Was there something specifically that like lit it up, or have you been thinking about it for a while?
Yeah, I dabbled through the years, but there was a couple of things that really made it happen. Back September last year, I bird hunted, upland hunted with my boys a little bit and as a kid. But last September, my oldest boy Tegan reached out to me, and he's a firefighter. He says, "Dad, I'm really into hunting, and I really want to learn how to do this. And I just bought a gun. He bought a Weatherby Vanguard." He says, I've been doing some research, and I discovered this guy Tim Kennedy down in Texas, and he's got this provider course, and he teaches you how to hunt. Well, I'd love to do that with you someday. And I'm like, man, you don't need to ask me twice to do something with you. Let's go. So we went down there, and my initial thing was, yeah, I like hunting. I'd love to do it. That's kind of cool. But to be with my son was the number one thing.
Sure.
That was joy. But then it just kind of ignited a little bit of a fire in me. That's pretty cool. I really like this. This is a passion that's been in the background for so long, something I wanted to do. I wouldn't say necessarily a passion at that point. But then my son, he came home and within right away pretty much said, Dad, you know what? I want to tell you, I want to move to Boise. I'm a firefighter. I want to hire in with the Boise Fire Department. I can't interview there until December, but that's the plan. I'm moving me and my family to Boise and into Idaho. And I'm like, wow, I'm so over California. I'd love to move to Idaho. So what happened was I went on YouTube for basically the first time in my life, because
Sure.
all I ever used YouTube for was like, how do you fix your dryer? Find a video, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
'Cause I'd never watched it. It was just really weird. And so I went on there and I started understanding and seeing what Idaho was like. And I was like blown away how beautiful it was. I mean, I didn't even recognize Idaho. I said, oh, yeah, I guess that's a state. And I always thought, well, it's flat and they grow potatoes.
Sure.
That was it. And I was completely encaptured by the mountains. It just enraptured me. And then we just had this hunting thing, and I went on YouTube. I said, I wonder if there's anything like hunting videos on in Idaho.
Yeah, yeah.
Lo and behold, this whole world opened up to me, and I fell in love with two things: the mountains and hunting at the same time, and specifically the backcountry hunting experience because that's where you got to see the mountains. And I just became totally obsessed with it, and it just captivated me so much. And I decided, we're going to move to Idaho because I can hunt more, and then I want to get out of California anyway, and I can go up there. And I said, you know what? I don't have any friends that hunt. My son's going to be really busy at work. I'm going to go get I'm going to get a tag, and I'm going to just go hunt. I'm going to be a
Sure.
backcountry hunter. And I just did a tag and got a tag to go in December, and I was lucky enough to get one. And I'm like, all right, here I am. I'm going. I got to get ready. So that was the thing between the mountains and the whole hunting intertwined with the backcountry hunting.
Yeah, yeah, so there's a couple things in there that I find interesting. Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my code CliffGray, CLIFFGRAY at checkout for 10% off and to support this content. Thanks, guys. One, like I get emails probably from guys with similar background, Tim, that weren't exposed to big game hunting like early on in life, the first half of their life, let's call it, or whatever. That made their families weren't big hunters, but they had the same interest. But what's weird is what's interesting is I bet half of them in the emails cite wanting to go hunting with their kids is like
Yeah.
one of the variables. He's like, hey, I'd really like to learn how to do this and be competent at it, so I could take my kids one day, which I find is interesting, and has become more and more a part of I think the vast majority of my clients. That's what that they consider that. Now the backcountry thing, what? Because it's dude, most guys. Well, if somebody, I mean, most guys that start hunting in their 50s or 60s, man, their first hunt is not a backpack hunt.
Yeah.
So what was that? Was that like a personal goal type of thing, or was it just the landscape?
It kind of was a thing is I want to see this topography. I want to be in this environment, these mountains. And everything I was looking at was pretty much Western hunting in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho in the backcountry,
Right.
and the whole thing it just intrigued me. I know I'll do the rest of it, but that's really what intrigued me is just the mountains.
Yeah, I got you. So it wasn't necessarily like the physical challenge or those sort of things.
No, no, I mean that became part of it, but that wasn't like, yeah, this would be a great physical challenge. Let's go do that. No, it was about I want to see this vista,
Yeah.
and yeah, certainly I could hike there, but I don't know that is a motivation enough for me. The fact that I want to hunt, my son wants to hunt, and the excitement that I saw in these videos I started watching, I just said, yeah, that's it. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So it's interesting, dude, because it seems like your intro to it or your mentality from the get go, it wasn't like up and down. You know what I mean? Like I vision these challenges as you go, but it sounds like you just decided to do it and you did it. One question I have to ask, particularly because you're Californian, do you feel like there was any social pressure not to be a hunter?
No, everybody's been really supportive. Only one comment I had when I when I shared that I shot the bear and sent a picture to a group of friends. One guy was like, "Well, what'd the bear do to you?" But other than that, everybody's been really supportive. And you know what? It's so new to everybody. This whole concept of backcountry hunting. Is they're like, oh, really? You would do that? You would go that far out and spend the night in the mountains and hunt? And most people that I know don't even know anybody that hunts. In fact, in our circle, and I don't have, I'm average, I suppose, in the number of friends I have, but I only know one guy that hunts. In all of the people that I know in California, one person. It's just not a community. And so, it's pretty typical California.
Right.
That's cool. Boy, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, yeah, but no, like real negativity
No,
about it.
but I don't
Yeah,
hang
and
around the liberal circles either. So,
yeah, yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, you're probably exposed to like to certain folks or whatever. So I get that component. And man, because people ask me all the time. And I stopped by on the drive back here from Idaho. I stopped by some hunting related businesses and did a podcast with some guys. And a lot of people within the business, they're noticing that there's this trend, Tim, of guys like you entering the market. And of course, like
yeah.
in any business, guys that sell things are trying to figure out what the source of that was, if it's going to grow, those sort of questions. And so I get asked that, why is that, why is that. And one of my responses has been that, at least from my perspective, and I have to admit that I'm kind of an outsider in this because I've been around a hunting family my whole life, but it seems like it's actually becoming a little bit more socially acceptable to hunt. And I mean, do you notice that at all, or am I
Yeah,
making that up?
I think so. I think it's become a little more mainstream. I think Meat Eater had a lot to do with that,
Yeah,
and Rogan, and you and I were talking about that on the hunt a little bit. That it's become a little more mainstream. I find it ironic that I didn't follow the typical path into being the adult onset hunter, where a bunch of people are going hunting. I want to do this too.
sure.
I had no idea it was popular.
Right.
And now that I'm into it, I wish it wasn't so popular because
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of people are hunting, but when something becomes mainstream, sometimes it kind of can detract from it a little bit and make it a little harder for some of those out there.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, and it's yeah, just kind of like trying to find a happy
Yeah,
medium, you know what I mean? Let's talk about the actual hunt, man, and then the preparation,
sure.
because how old, do you mind sharing your age, Tim? Are you
Yeah, I turned 65 in March.
So you started hunting 64, 65.
Yeah,
Physical preparation, man. And I think so. One, I'll say this about you and all the 8 hunters I had the last 2 weeks. All of them were in pretty good shape, and there was like, I mean, I calculate my mind, but at least like a couple 100 pounds was lost, in preparation for the hunt, which is awesome. But I want to know like how you took on that part of it, and maybe describe like where you were at in the beginning, because maybe it wasn't that big of a deal to you, Tim. I don't know, but you ended up being pretty prepared. So how'd you get there?
Yeah, thanks. Well, like a lot of people who are, growing a family and, raising a family and, working and whatever, every year you gain a couple of pounds. And that was the same way. So I packed it on pretty heavy. I held my weight pretty well, but I was well overweight. But I had always been athletic. I played golf regularly, and I played tennis, and I played for the last 25 years. I've played tennis 2 to 3 times a week. So that was kind of like I always said, well, yeah, I'm in pretty good shape because I play tennis, and that would equate to up to 6 hours a week of tennis. And so that's
Sure.
that's pretty good. And I played competitively, and I played in tournaments, and I was nationally ranked, not real high, but nationally ranked in the 50s. So I was a pretty good tennis player. So that's what I had done prior to getting interested in tennis. And then a little bit before I became so obsessed with hunting is I asked my boys if they would go on a trip with me to Bandon Dunes for a golf outing. And anybody that knows anything about golf, Bandon Dunes is kind of a bucket list place to go. It's in Bandon, Oregon. It's right on the coast. I think they got 6 courses there. It's just a magic place. There's nothing out there but the golf. It's almost like you're in Scotland. And But they only will walk on that course. You can't drive a cart.
Okay.
So, I'm like, well, I only drive a cart and I drink beer. So maybe I should start walking a little bit. So over a year ago, I said, I got to start walking. So I added that to my routine. So I started walking when I played golf. So that added 8 miles a week. So now I was doing 6 hours of tennis and having an 8 hour walk. And that got me prepared for Bandon. Then I jumped into the hunting thing and got the tag and said, I got to get in shape. There's no way I can do this at this weight and this physical condition, even though I'm probably pretty good for someone who's 64 years old. So I added to that some strength training. I got a TRX, and I was just doing some light stuff on my own initially, and started doing some hiking and a little bit more activity. Started adjusting my diet, limited my alcohol significantly. Started eating very whole foods type of diet, a lot of protein and lean proteins, and stayed away from carbs and those type of things. And then I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is October. I've got until next. I've got a year here to totally get this in shape before I go on my deer hunt. And then when I got your email saying that this bear hunt was coming up in the Selway, I got really interested, and I told my wife about it. She goes, you need to do this. You need to go out there with someone. I don't think you should go out in the middle of the woods by yourself for the first time doing this. You should go with
Sure.
someone who knows what they're doing. And I said, you don't have to ask me twice. I'll do that. And so I signed up for it, and then I almost backed out. I think, man, I can't get ready. This is 8 weeks away. I mean, I know
Right.
that I'm okay, and I'm starting to lose some weight, and I'm doing some things, but this is really I got to really ramp this up. So I hired a strength coach, and with the sole objective, I said, listen, I'm going on this backcountry hunt in the Selway Wilderness in 8 weeks. I need to be ready. So we need to work on legs, upper body. We need to get me ready for this hunt. And I'm going to be carrying a pack. And I started rucking twice a week with weighted packs. It got up to about 60 pounds. One of the rucks that I would do was a trail around here called Montserrat, which is about 4 miles with a little over 1,200 foot elevation, really rough trail.
Sure.
So did that twice a week, the tennis, the golf, strength training 3 times a week. So I was literally working out 6 days a week between tennis, golf, rucking, strength training, and then my diet. And then the other prep that I did was I, I've got my CCW, and I do training with handguns with a guy who's a former Marine sniper. And so I started doing some training with long gun, rifle, long shot type training. So that was the total preparation. And from the time I started until the time I stepped on the airplane to go to the Selway, I had lost 54 pounds.
Within the 8 weeks, or the
No,
whole
that was
year.
from
Okay.
October of last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. And I always love it when I hear that, Tim, because it's like it's kind of like two different goals were accomplished, right? It's
Yeah.
one leads the other, which I think is pretty good. And I think, not to get like too corny about it, but I think when you stack a lot of these different things that sometimes hunting is just a motivator for, it actually makes life a lot better in a lot of ways. So I think it's always cool to hear that. Now on the physical front, uh, what's your assessment, man? Like post-mortem, and just so the viewers know, um, I wouldn't. It wasn't like the most physical backpack hunt, but we for sure covered some ground. I think several days we hiked 5 or 6 miles at least. Maybe the biggest day we hiked 7 or 8 miles, and then probably 1,000 to 1,200 feet of net elevation was kind of like a bigger day when we were stalking bears. So just so people get a perspective of what we were looking at. Um, it was for sure a backpack hunt, so we're carrying between 45 and maybe the packs when we packed your bear out were 80 pounds. So that kind of gives a feel for what you were exposed to. What's kind of your post-mortem on that? Did from a preparation standpoint?
Yeah, so just to put that in perspective, on the oldest guy in the group, I had 20 years on, and the youngest guy had 35 years on. So I was definitely the old guy. Um, I didn't crash and burn, but I definitely realized I still need to be stronger, significantly stronger. I was slower than everybody on the hikes. I hike at a slower pace, and the thing that was probably the most difficult for me, my pack was probably just under 70 pounds. I think when I weighed it, I think that was difficult for me, and I was surprised by that because like today, for example, I did my first ruck since the trip, and I had 65 pounds on and did a 3 mile hike, and it wasn't bad. I mean, rucking with that kind of weight is never easy, but it wasn't
Sure.
bad. But I felt that was an area that showed me that I needed improvement on. And, I was disappointed that I didn't do better. I don't think I, held anybody up, and everybody was gracious, to me. It, you know, but that was post-mortem. I go, you know what, there's some areas that I need some work on. And the strength area, I can get there, right? 8 weeks is not a long time to be with a strength coach and get ready to do that
Sure.
type of thing. In a year's time, I'll be better, I'll be stronger, and I'll have a lot more miles underneath me, and I'll be able to handle that kind of weight on a pack better than I did. I don't know that I'll ever be as fast as everybody else there. One of the things I learned is that you all young guys don't hike, you run. Uh, when you got a pack on your back, I'm like, dang, I think I'm going pretty fast, but these guys are just hauling butt. And I think it's just a function of age. But again, everybody's real gracious. I held my own, but I held my own about 30 yards behind everybody.
Yeah, no, I
There's
thought
a,
I mean I thought you did good because we were pace is not that big of a deal. It's more like when you're having to stop, stop a lot, and I don't remember much of that on the trip at all, to be honest, across the group. Um, no, but I understand what you're saying. It's helped me a lot, Tim, is like core strength stuff. Um,
yeah.
so I don't know if you've explored that at all, but on your pack weight, because I don't want to forget to dive into this because a big component of this for a new hunter, particularly from the backpacking perspective, is gear. I'm sure you spend a lot of hours on your computer researching gear and maybe having fun with it and maybe having some stress about it and everything in between. But was there anything that you won't take again?
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons I moved to Southern California is I don't like cold weather.
Yeah,
And I always say that cold is a button you should push. It shouldn't be forced upon you. And so I was a little concerned about that. So I not only brought, 15-degree sleeping bag, but I also brought my Kafaru Wooby. So that was an extra thing I didn't need to do. There's some things,
yeah,
and that was a postmortem that I really spent a lot of time on. What can I get out of my pack because it's too
sure.
heavy. Um, and the reality was, I can only come up with the fact that I probably had about 2 pounds too much of food in the 2 pounds of the whoopie. Everything else I kind of left. I brought extra stuff, but we left it at the wall tent. I didn't take it on the actual hike itself. So my pack should have been about maybe 4 or 5 pounds lighter. Everything else I think was fairly essential. I mean, could I do without a pair of puffy pants? Yeah, but puffy pants for a couple ounces. And I know ounces tend to add up, but there really wasn't a lot of things that I had that I felt was uh, I shouldn't brought other than the whoopee and too much food. Um,
Yeah,
so
like nothing
that's the
nothing
postmortem.
egregious.
Yeah, right,
Right.
right.
What
I mean, I brought a stove, but
on
I didn't hike with it. We left it at the camp.
right. On the gear, do you have any recommendations on like, gear purchasing or anything like that, Tim? Again, most people on these trips were pretty well prepared. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Because that can be a challenge in its own right. And then, I mean, I don't know if you shopped around budget wise or anything either. So, did you have any tactics on that front?
I did, and I really enjoyed that process of it because I was determined not to do my best not to pay full retail for anything, and I did a pretty good job
Mm-hmm.
with that. I really started getting into it in October, and so right around the corner was Black Friday. So I was all teed up for Black Friday, and I bought a lot of stuff on Black Friday. I bought, I don't know, six, seven, eight things on Black Friday for 30, 40% off or whatever I could. So I got a lot of gear there. And then came the Christmas sales and the after Christmas sales. And then, so I just kept looking for sales, knowing I had some time there. I had a gear list of things I wanted to get and kept doing that. And I saved a ton of money that way just by taking my time. You don't need, I'm fortunate enough that I got Sitka stuff, but Sitka, or Kuyu, all that's top name stuff. You don't have to spend that kind of money on stuff. But even then, that and First Light and all the others, you can buy that stuff on sale or used and get a pretty good deal. Um, or you can buy other gear as well. But I was fortunate enough; I had the time and I enjoyed doing it, and I did that. The other thing I did, which is I don't know if it's a sale or anything, but there are a few things I couldn't buy on sale. But I I had everybody gets reward points when you use your credit cards, and I never pay attention to that. And for over a decade, I've never even looked at those numbers. And then all of a sudden, I
Yeah,
realized, hey, I got some reward points. I had a half a million points. And so
sure.
that's like 5 grand worth of, in my mind, free money because I didn't have to take money out of my bank account. So I used all that and bought 5 grand worth of gear just with that right there, and it wasn't money out of my checking account per se. So
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's an accounting chunk that you can just use, and I actually think that's even if it's you don't have that sort of setup with points or whatever. I think it's a good way to approach it, Tim, is to have like a certain amount you want to spend, and then like you said, be patient. Be patient because every hunting company that I know of, they they have pretty significant sales. But if you wait
yeah,
till 2.5 months before the fall, you're gonna pay retail for everything. But if you're willing to just be
right,
patient and wait, almost everything cycles through as a sale, and
yeah.
you can make it work. So I think that's all very very good stuff. I had a couple questions from my group, Tim, and maybe we'll
Okay.
jump into those. Then we can talk about the hunt a little bit. Lindsay asked me a question, and Lindsay, he actually hunted with us this last week. Great guy, but the question he had was, Tim, did you feel any bear fever? I think he's like, bear fever instead of buck fever while lining up and making the shot. Not sure what Tim used for his hunt in terms of a rifle and gear, but interested to hear how he thought about, or if he did think about Scott Messer's accuracy versus precision concept at all. I'm not sure if you caught that podcast, but do you have any thoughts on this question, Tim? Cliff's Hunter. I created this knife from iteration in the field. It has been modified and perfected for the backcountry use case. It is my belief that in terms of all-around knives, this is the last knife that an elk hunter, mule deer hunter, sheep hunter, goat hunter will need to buy. Go check it out on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. In the top right, click shop, then Cliff's Hunter. All the details are there.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was probably the most standoutish of the entire hunt was the actual sequence going into the shot, because it surprised me. It was one of the strangest experiences I've ever had, and it was nothing like I expected. I did not have buck fever whatsoever. The moment I spotted the bear, all emotion left me. It was as if the process was driving everything. I was kind of like, it's coin a phrase, in a zone, but I was just hyper focused all of a sudden. I just started ticking off what I needed to do. I was lucky that I had my tripod up from glassing and I was already sitting down. So all I had to do is take my binos off. I have a quick shot adapter, that an Argali quick shot adapter that has an Arca Swiss adapter on it. Just threw that on there. It was able to put my rifle had already been out because we saw a bear earlier that I almost had a shot at. I just needed to, chamber around, put the safety on, put my ear protection in. I checked the range. I checked the cant on the rifle, checked the range again. I clicked the safety off. Jesse was there, and I heard him, say no cubs, and then I put the ears in. And I couldn't hear anything else he said, and then it just kind of went. I just said to myself, um, I put the crosshairs on the bear, and I just said, okay, relax the right hand, no pressure on the right hand, breathe. On the next breath, make sure the rifle's tight into my shoulder. On the next breath, you're going to breathe out, and you're going to slowly squeeze and stay with the gun. And that's all I did. I wasn't thinking about the bear. I wasn't thinking about the shot. It was right lined up. She had turned quartered to me, and it just happened. And it was like, I wasn't thinking about shooting a bear. I was thinking about the process, and it was almost kind of out of body ish, if you will. I was just
Yeah.
so focused on that. So it was really kind of weird. And then when the shot went off, she was only 205 yards away, and I looked up, and I could see her really clear. She was in an opening, and she just ran. And I thought, oh shoot, I must have missed her,
Yeah.
And then she ran 15 yards and she was on a ridge, and she just tumbled for like 70 yards and fell against a ponderosa pine, and she just lay there. So she was, and I look at Jesse, and we both go, yeah, she's dead. And
Right.
we just sat there and stared at her. So it was a really strange experience that way, because I mean, you came up a minute or two later, like, did you shoot her? Did you kill her? Because you're not really, you have
Yeah.
no emotion here. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any emotion.
Yeah, it's
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 weird.
it, it's interesting how um, everybody reacts differently. You know what I mean, Tim? And just so the listeners or viewers know what we're talking about is I had actually stepped away to like get up above us and glass a little bit from a different angle, and then you shot the bear during that period of time, which was awesome. But when I came down, I had no frame of reference like what had happened, and you were relaxed at that point, which was like to me was a little bit surprising. You know what I mean? I didn't know. To be transparent, I thought you had missed. Yeah, given there's almost like because there wasn't like a lot of excitement or anything
Right.
either. And then I think as we figured out our approach to the bear and stuff, maybe there's a little more excitement to the deal, but um, it's very interesting to me because and I'd love to hear your opinion. My opinion is sometimes just people's personalities different. Everybody's preparation's way different. Um, and so it's weird that people can have such a different reaction. I mean, because I could talk to one of the hunters this last week, and I guarantee you that at least one of them is going to say, hey, like the first big game animal I shot, I don't even remember it because like my mind literally went blank with bear fever, buck fever, or whatever. So, do you have thoughts on it, Tim? Do you think it was preparation? Do you think it's just was it a mindset slash personality thing? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't want to give myself credit where credit isn't due, but I do think a lot of it had to do with preparation and the time I spent with Blue, in the long range shooting, and getting rid of some bad habits there, and shooting enough to know that if I slap at the trigger, it's going to be an off shot. if I do this quick. I think had the situation been different, if I needed to set up a tripod, if I needed to hurry and rush more than I was, then I probably would have had a lot more anxiety in the moment. But because everything was kind of right there, I just needed to put things in place, and I was able to think through it. So the thought, the training, literally the training that I had a week earlier when I was shooting to 500 yards with my rifle. And by the way, it's a Weatherby 6.5 RPM Mark 5, the Live Wild
Remy's
Remy's gun.
model. Yep.
Yeah, it's a 5.8 pound gun before the scope, so it's a really nice gun. It's light. So and the bullet just was flawless. It was a bullseye shot. It was exactly where I aimed it. Right,
Yeah.
we don't know for certain, but it was probably a heart shot. So it was right there. Yeah, so I just think it had to do with the training. I mean, those thoughts were going through my mind with the loosening of the right hand and the breathing and just squeezing lightly and staying with it. Those were again, it was just process driven, just going through those steps. The bear was almost a secondary thing. So
Sure.
I surprised myself honestly with that because I had no idea how I would react, but that's just how it happened. Thankfully.
Yeah, no, and that's how it should happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's awesome. But one thing you said in there too that I thought was interesting, and a lot of people who are doing some of their first hunts will probably run into it, or even if you've hunted, um, small game and that sort of thing, you may notice this when you go to hunting big game. The observation that larger animals don't show when they're hit is a surprise to a lot of
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
Bears sometimes I wasn't watching the one that you shot, so I don't know. A lot of times bears will like bite back, and then
Mhm.
you hit them. But a lot of times they'll just sprint. Elk. I've had elk get hit perfectly and just start to walk off. I've had bulls get shot and walk 5 feet and bugle and then drop over dead.
Hmm.
And it's kind of it's a surprise a lot of the time. You know what I mean? I think it's good to understand that it's not this visualization that they're just gonna fall immediately. It's good to know that's not always a reality.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because there's tactical things too, right? You don't you want to be ready to shoot again, those sort of things. If it's not a perfect shot, but yeah, your observation on that's pretty spot on. Any thoughts like when we were walking up on the bear or anything like that, Tim? Like, hey, oh man, did it kind of strike you at some point that, oh yes, we did just kill this animal?
Yeah, it was growing on me for sure. I mean, it was as you know, a hellacious walk down those
Yeah,
alders, um, and at that point, I wish I had a handgun because I had to walk down like it was probably a 30-degree pitch and all these alders, and you're like you got to lead, you got the gun, you got to have
yeah,
a round chambered in case that bear's alive, and so I didn't have use of my arms per se, so it was pretty hellacious, just trying to find her. But it was like, oh my gosh, this really happened. It just kind of like, wow, what just happened? Did I
right.
just really do this? This is just really crazy. It was just kind of out of body ish.
Yeah. No, no, I get it. And sometimes it's to me it's weird when you have a situation like that because even for me, Tim, like you see where the bear is, we know where the bear went. She had rolled down, so we couldn't like make clear visual with her, but it didn't look like it was that far. And then you start climbing down in there, and you're like, "Holy shit! This is it's chaotic." You know what I mean? It just from like a brush perspective and the grade of the topography and everything else. But it's weird because when that happens, you can kind of forget that you kind of forget that the animal was shot, right? And then you don't really then you finally when you find him, you're like, oh yeah, this actually did occur. It's not like a daydream we had. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of funny that way. But any on the I guess like so on the firearm stuff, you wouldn't have really changed anything, or you felt prepared on that front. Good with your rests, all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I was
they
real happy the way the gun performed. I was concerned because, this is the first time I went hunting with it. And a few weeks before that, I went out to do some long range shooting to see how long I could get it out there. And we zeroed it at 100 yards. And then the fog came in. I wasn't able to shoot. So I came back the week before we went back out to do it. And it had only been 2 weeks. And for some reason, we don't know what, but my zero was off by 40 MOA. And so and I'm like, holy crap, man, it's just going to happen out in the field. Am I going to be like,
right,
not be able to keep a zero and miss something that big? So I was really pleased the way everything performed, all my gear, with the exception of my headlamp, everything performed flawlessly.
right. Yeah, yeah. So no,
Wouldn't change
no,
the
no.
gun.
What's that?
Wouldn't change a thing with the gun. I love the gun. Yeah,
Yeah, everything
setup.
worked out, and that's the thing is like having that last bit of. And we shot when you were there. You had mentioned the problem. You had mentioned that issue you had, and then you shot it one more time, and then you shot it again when we were there after travel. So that bit of confidence always helps too. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Just
yeah.
right, just to make sure that you don't have that problem. One question I have, and I want you to be totally transparent on feedback, Tim. But part of this hunt that I did with you guys is so I've done a variation of this in the past where actually in person we did some skill set slash like seminar stuff. So in the mornings we would get up and I'd go over glassing, or I'd go over bear behavior. I'd go over thermals in the mornings, and I found that when I did these hunts that way, it was trying to do too much, and it affected, I think, our logistics on the hunt, and then everybody's just mental bandwidth, right? So this year, I moved a bunch of it online, and we did 4 or 5 Zoom calls. I did like a live stream on a few things. I tried to cover that stuff in a virtual way. Um, do you have any thoughts on that, Tim? And anything's fair game.
Sure. I'm glad you did it that way. I really look forward to those online discussions and learning experiences, and getting to know and answering everybody, and getting to know answer some questions, and getting prepared to see. It added some confirmation to me that okay, I got the right gear, and all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff was very informative, and it kept me in the process of thinking about the hunt. I think, frankly, it would have, personally, in my own opinion, was that if you had done that in the mornings, it would have pulled away from the experience because,
Yeah.
um, I mean, granted, the mornings are pretty loose, right? I tell everybody now that bear hunting is kind of like summer camp without the mosquitoes. It's you get
Right.
to sleep in, you just lounge around in the morning, and you kind of figure out what you're going to do in the afternoon. You hike out a few miles, and you spend it, and then you sit all day, for the rest of the afternoon unless you kill something. And so it's kind of fun that way. But that component of it was just special too, even though there wasn't you know, group kumbaya songs or anything like that. It was just
Yeah. Yeah.
part of what a hunter would do, right? So you'd be out there and
Yeah.
you'd be doing your morning routine, you'd be hanging out, you'd be, talking with the guys. And I thought that was just a good part of the experience as well. And I really appreciated being on that stuff. So I like that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate. Kind of a component of it that I didn't anticipate, Tim, is it's kind of nice for everybody in the group just to have met each other, even if it's just in a virtual way. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's a nice component of it. And reflecting on it too, from my perspective, I think even on hunts that aren't marketed or are sold as having this learning skill set component, I think all outfitters should have a Zoom call with their clients beforehand, because
I
selfishly,
agree.
man, I think it's a big part of why everybody showed up ready. You know what I mean? There was like
Hmm.
I didn't have a single person who had, a cold sleeping bag, who had an egregiously heavy pack, like those sort of things. I didn't have any of those issues, and I'm sure it's nice for the client, but it's also very nice for me and Cade because then we don't have somebody that we have to deal with, issues on that front. So that was, I really enjoyed that component of it,
Yeah, hey, just real quick, a shout out to Cade. I really appreciate that guy. Hunting and guiding is his DNA, man. He's just, it's his lifeblood, and I really appreciate him. And Cade, if you're listening, I just really appreciate you and your effort in this. So thanks so much.
Yeah, and he's a fun guy to have on any of these trips, man. He's a good dude. He works
Absolutely.
hard. Um, One question I have for you, Tim. Do you think if you hadn't have killed a bear, have you thought about, what you would have felt at the end of the hunt? Would you been upset? Would you have felt more motivated to do it again? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, no, I do have thoughts on that. I did not go in with the expectation that I was going to kill a bear. Um, my expectation and goal was to have the experience more as kind of a training thing for my October hunt.
Right.
Just to be able to say I did it and experience it, and now I've got one rep under my belt, so to speak. And as one of the attractions to this particular course that was in the description was that this transfers over to other types of hunting, big game hunting, and so that was there. I never really went in with the intention of when I started hunting that, oh, I'm going to go shoot bears. I didn't really. I was mostly excited about. I am mostly excited about shooting elk and deer.
Sure.
To be honest with you, and I'm sure that'll evolve. Now I want to shoot bear, but
Yeah, yeah.
uh, so it was just the opportunity that was in front of me, and so it was about the experience. So I told everybody I don't. If I come back with the bear, it would just be the gravy on the or the icing on the cake, so to speak. So not disappointed. Wouldn't have been disappointed if I didn't come back with a bear. Just completely flabbergasted that I did. So
Sure. Sure. Man, I like that specific environment and that specific type of hunt. I've chose it so there's as much as applicable to other species as possible, and I hope that I'll have to talk to you after you do your deer hunt, Tim, because I think you'll find that a lot of this stuff is pretty applicable, um, and yeah, you'll just have to let me know on that front.
yeah, I'd love any input you could get. In fact, I've got some questions for you.
Yeah, 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 no, for sure. But man, before I let you go, like any broad advice for somebody thinking about doing it? Um, any kind of takeaways for guys that maybe were in your position? Guys, Cliff's Rod. This is my field sharpener. I created it based on iteration in the field. This is what I need. I can sharpen up my short knives, my long knives, a boning knife, a fillet knife. I built in a sweet handle on here. You can go on the website, pursuitwithcliff.com. In the top right corner, hit shop. Hit Cliff's Rod. All the details are there. I've spent a lot of time in the field perfecting this thing. Go check it out, guys.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a new hunter and you're a little bit on the older side, you know, you don't have to do backcountry hunting. If that happens to be where right now my passion is, and part of it is something I want to experience while I can, because I don't have a lot of runway left to be able to do that. I don't know if in 5 years when I'm 70, if I'll be doing this kind of stuff. Unlikely. So now at least got the experience. But there are less strenuous ways to do it. But if you decide that backcountry hunting is your thing that you want to do, the go all in, and understand that it's a full year commitment to be ready. And the best tool that you bring with you when you do that is your body. And if you don't have your body in shape, it's just not going to be as fun. And I learned I got some limitations I got to work on. And I think everybody goes out there and goes, yeah, I need to work on these things. But me in particular, um, my advice would be just to try it, be passionate about it. If you, it can transform your life. And I think it did to me, and it's transformed it so much. in so many different ways. And I think it can be, particularly if you take it as a year round training, right?
Right.
Where you're trying to get in shape so that you can be a better hunter, so that you can do these things, because it is not easy carrying around a pack and climbing up hills. But it can be transformative. Formative. I'm a much healthier person because of it. And I believe that the quality of my life and the number of years that I have in God's green earth here will be longer simply because of hunting. Um, it's really been a life changer for me. And then, for all of us, there's a line in the sand where we're just not going to be able to do this anymore. And
Right.
to have the experience of this is just something that you take with you. I mean, money can only mean so much. The true riches in life are the experiences that you have. And I have to tell you that the Selway experience was one of the richest experiences that I've had in my life. And kudos to you and anybody that's listening to this that wasn't on the trip and is maybe thinking about it. You need to go and do this with Cliff and Cade. This is a wonderful, wonderful experience. Cliff, you and Cade just nailed it. You just striped it right down the middle of the fairway. And it was, you made everybody feel completely welcome, at home, competent. There was some concern, being a new hunter. I think any new hunter felt the same way. Gosh, we get some experienced guys in there. Am I going to feel overwhelmed by this? You didn't make us feel ostracized or anything. You felt like we were one of the group. The
Sure.
experiences with guys, you just did a tremendous job. And I would encourage anybody, you need to do this trip with Cliff, or this, or one of your trips.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Tim. And the Selway has some, and I try to do that in the other trips too, like just flying in there and all of that for guys that haven't done it. And dude, and I admittedly, I sometimes I take it for granted. I take the adventure component of it for granted, but I get it, I always get like a twinkle making that last final turn into one of those strips up in the bush. You kind of like, oh, this is way cool. Not everybody gets to do this, you know.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
then yeah, reflecting on an earlier thing you said is I think a lot of people just don't know it exists, you
Yeah.
know. And there's a lot of places like that here, and there's places internationally like that too. So, anyways, man, I really enjoyed having you, Tim. I'm glad you got a bear, and we had a good time, and
Yeah.
that's
Thank
what
you
it's
for all your help.
all
Wonderful
about.
experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Have you eaten any of the bear yet?
I did. We had some family over on Saturday and had some bear. Um, Taste was good. It was as hard as shoe leather. so, so
Have to work on some.
we got to work on some things. I've got a recipe and I got a roast that we're going to cook up on Friday. That's going to go in the slow cooker, and it
Okay.
promises to be, meat off the bone tender. So we're going to try that.
Nice. Awesome, dude. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks, Cliff. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.